Welcome back to another episode. Today, I'm joined by my rebel visionary guest, Lori Teal. She is an integrative psychiatric nurse practitioner who is saying fuck it to standard care in the treatment of mental health. She has been in this field for over 30 years and is so clear on what mental illness is and is not. Her journey weaves her individual stories of finding wisdom through chronic illness and generational traumas, as well as studying hypnotherapy, breath work, shamanic techniques, integrative psychiatry, heart math, and now the world of quantum medicine and homeopathy. She specializes in trauma through the lens of how trauma impacts the mind, body, and spirit of an individual, looking at each individual's stories and patterns that keep them from unlocking their own wisdom and self-love. She believes it's all energy and is passionate about showing people the power they really have. Wow, what a powerhouse. Thank you for being here with me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you so much, Erica, for inviting me and to be able to share, this mission of really empowering each individual. I love having the opportunity to really speak about that, especially coming from, an old paradigm of what mental health, is believed to be.
Yeah, 100%. We're going to dive into that conversation today. And first, I want to ask you, Lori, what are some boxes that you've found yourself in throughout your life?
Holy moly, we could talk about this for a long time. So, one of the boxes that I had found myself in was a chronic illness box. So there's that box. There's the box of what it means to be a woman. There's a box of what it means to be the oldest child. There's the box of what it means to be a healthcare provider. There's the box of what psychiatry is. I mean, I could go on and on with the level of boxes, and I think that each box we clear, we become more available to what our level of freedom is and what our level of authenticity is, and then just another box appears because we can only see like the level of denial that we remain in at the level of vibration and awareness of where we're at. Like denial serves us. Those boxes served me for a long time, right? Until they no longer served, until it became so uncomfortable to live in that box anymore that it restricted my own voice and my own freedom and my own level of awareness for going to the next level, whatever that means to each individual, right? And then it was the next box that needed to be cleared, the next restraint that of my own thinking that prohibited me from stepping into a new awareness.
I love that perspective that, yeah, boxes aren't something that's set in stone and that you have to stay in forever. Rather, it's really just self-awareness of where am I landing in this moment of time? What do I believe are my perceived limitations? And when
I
you
know.
have that self-awareness, from there comes choice, comes freedom.
Right.
Do I want to stay in this box? How might it serve me? How doesn't? Or is there a different box to play in? Or let me be outside the box for a little while.
Right, exactly. And that's where freedom really comes in, right? Is when we have the choice to really decide like how is this serving me, like you said, and then how is it not serving me? And then what direction do I really want to go in? And sometimes taking that leap, right? Like the fool's card in the tarot, right? Like that leap can feel so gigantic sometimes. And so scary. And at this, I can say on the other end of that, it's so rewarding.
Yeah. And I'm particularly interested about this box of chronic illness that you spoke to,
Sure.
and especially for some of our listeners who may be experiencing this. My interpretation of chronic illness is that it's maybe something you experience in your whole lifetime. It's not acute where it's a singular moment in time. It has some longevity to it. And I imagine being diagnosed with chronic illness, you may adopt this mindset of like, well, this is who I am now, and I'm like forever limited by this. I'm curious, when you were experiencing your chronic illness, what is the mindset that you took on about yourself? Was it similar to that? And kind of just if you take us through your journey of fucking that box.
Sure, sure. So that journey began when I was 22 years old. I had a daughter who, at the time, who was a little bit over a year. I was in a new relationship, and I got really sick. And when I went to the doctors in and out of the emergency room, no one could really tell me what was the matter with me at that time. I had every workup that could be done, so on and so forth. And it was chronic fatigue syndrome, and that's what they called it. That was many years ago. We know a lot more about chronic fatigue syndrome now, but then they didn't really know a whole lot about it. And the basis was you're just going to have to wait to feel better, and we can give you an antidepressant, and maybe that will help you. But I was tired. I wasn't depressed. I couldn't take a shower and then go down and fix myself or my daughter breakfast without feeling like I had to go back to bed. Like, it was significant fatigue, debilitating fatigue. And in that process too, not only was I not holding hydration well, I was either vomiting or shitting it out. I had acne all over, like all over my chest, all over my back, all over my face. And all they wanted to do was say, well, I don't know how to help you, but you can take an antidepressant. Well, that didn't solve any problem for me. And so after going to multiple doctors and getting the same information and feeling the level of helplessness, like, I loved being a mom. And so to not be able to take care of my daughter and to not put any, have any energy for a new relationship, let alone fucking work. Okay. That then like something else had to shift and change. I couldn't just lay there in bed watching somebody else care for my child. That was never going to work for me. And so I happened to see a friend of ours who was a chiropractor. It was the first time I'd ever been to chiropractic care. And I had a treatment done, and I was like, wow, that was so amazing. And I talked to him about what my story was. And he said, listen, I know a different chiropractor who really may be able to help you. His techniques are really a little bit out of the box, a little unconventional. And I said, I don't care at this point. Like, I will do anything to feel better. And so I went to that, woo-woo chiropractor at the time, who was doing all these very interesting things, including like doing liver flushes and gallbladder cleanses and things that no one else at that time was doing. Now it's like, oh, you did that, no big deal. But in 30 years ago, that was a really big deal. And I can remember what it was like doing the liver cleanse that he had me do. It was the most horrific, disgusting thing, to like be pooping these gigantic gallstones. But after that, I started to have another layer of health that came. The acne cleared up. I started to have a little bit more vitality. I also did a huge candida cleanse because I had a candida overgrowth. And so it was like levels of wellness started to return at each intervention phase that I did. And I was so incredibly grateful for him, because not only did he help me start to regain my own health back, but he also exposed me to a whole different area of medicine that I think really set the foundation for me to continue to look in other areas. At that point, I hadn't become a nurse yet, but I ended up going to nursing school. I ended up, starting with healing touch and therapeutic touch, and then Reiki certification. And then like things just continue to build from there, right? And at each new place, there was this illness for me at this moment, I say this illness for me, I no longer have chronic fatigue symptoms. Okay. So I have other things that I deal with, but it's not necessarily chronic fatigue symptoms anymore. And at each level of health, I started to see my world so much differently. My paradigm shift started to happen. I started to, even garden more, grow herbs, like basic things. Then started to get into doing did some therapy and looked at how my trauma impacted that level of illness and that chronic fatigue thing. And so like we're multidimensional human beings. We can't just look at just nutrition, just therapy, just a relationship. Like all of these things impact us, not just spirituality. Like we're multidimensional. And so it's for me, it was really important to start looking at, okay, so who was I with this woman who had a trauma history and this woman who had this chronic fatigue diagnosis that I just have to wait to see if it gets better. Like who was I? What were my values? What was important to me? Where did I come from? How do I not want, like, what are the patterns that I don't want my daughter and then eventually my son growing up in? Right. And like nobody's going to take care of that except for me. So and that just continued to build and grow. And so what I ended up learning about chronic fatigue virus is that I am so incredibly grateful that it happened, because through that course of that whole journey and paying attention to all those different aspects of my life, where did I come from? What's the story of abandonment from my biological dad? What's the story of my trauma? What's the story of sexuality? What's the story of my health? Like, what's the story of my spirituality? What purpose am I here to do? Who am I and who do I think I am? you know, um, those aspects of my life, even beginning that process, also brought me to a place of having my first colonoscopy done at 28. Because at that time I was investigating the abandonment of my dad at early childhood, to find out that he had colon cancer, and colon cancer was on both sides of my family. And so I had my first colonoscopy and they found precancerous polyps. And so I don't think if I had not had chronic fatigue virus, I would never have looked at my relationships. I would never have gone into trauma, looking at my trauma through the trauma lens. I would never have looked at nutrition. It wouldn't have brought me to where it is that I am now. And the way that it continued to inform me as years went on was the way that I would push myself and make myself suffer in order to please somebody else. And that became like the really big point of what chronic fatigue virus, how that served me. Like it served me, and I didn't know it at the time, and I didn't even know it at the time when I was doing in my 20s and into my 30s about, I was looking at all these different aspects of myself and growing and continue to look at decreasing symptomatology and whatever and gaining vitality. But I didn't know the degree of what that virus taught me till probably in my mid 40s, during a couple of other ceremonies that I did. One was plant medicine, and one was also, I was a sun moon dancer for a couple of years as well. And I got to really understand in those moments that I push myself so hard. And that's amazing, because look where I am in my life. And I'm so grateful to that. But also, like, look how much suffering I'm willing to do in order to something else. Be a healer for somebody else. Give my money away. Push myself to my gardening ability. Like I could show you outside and the amount of rocks that I have moved and stacked. And like, I have a rock wall that I built during my divorce 15 years ago that is probably the length of a football field and 5 feet high. And at that time when I did that, I was so unglued with the ending of this relationship and wanting to like be liked, and I would turn myself inside out for this human being, right? It's a very narcissistic relationship, and I would turn myself inside out for this relationship. And when that was no longer there, I didn't even feel like I could breathe. Right. And so I didn't know what to do with all of this energy and all of this panic. And so I built this rock wall, and that's just one that's 5 feet high. And I'm talking rocks, like gigantic rocks. And during my plant medicine experience a handful of years ago, I looked at that rock wall and I started to sob. And it became like my own weeping wall
Mm.
because I had so much compassion for myself in that moment. Like, what the fuck was I doing to myself? Like, I was killing myself out there. Right now, I'm just going to disclose I am 25 pounds more than I ever been in my whole life. And in that experience, I was 90 pounds, and my primary care doctor was calling to make sure I wasn't anorexic because I was not stopping to eat. I was not stopping to pee. Like, so I was still like suffering and like, and nobody was there. Like, the relationship wasn't there to like cause the suffering. It was what I was doing to myself. And I didn't have that level of awareness really until like probably a handful of years ago. And so every time there's a layer of awareness that comes up, right? There's more work to do. Holy shit, like look at the compassion that I can have for myself. I always wanted everybody else to like love me like that. And there was so much energy going out into the world of just see me, just love me. Somebody like take care of me. Somebody see my value. And in that moment, I'm like, bam, like I'm the only one that really needs to see my value. I'm the one that really has to have compassion for me. I have to choose loving me over loving someone else. And that was like huge. And when I look back at the course of the chronic fatigue virus, I truly believe, Erica, that I would not be in this place in my life with this level of awareness and compassion for me had I not gone through that experience because it taught me, like it honed me to, like it woke me up. That's the only thing, like it woke me up. I call that in my practice, like it's the 2x4 that kind of came along and boom, wake the fuck up. Like this is not the life that you intended to live.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And I think we definitely share similar beliefs that when we have maybe these physical or mental dis-ease that are showing up in our external reality, it's like that 2x4. It's actually delivered as a message, something that's actually for you and your evolution to tell you there's something that's not being seen. There's something that's not being listened to inside. So, our bodies are actually so intelligent. We're going to create this thing that's going to mess up your life in the external reality until
Yeah,
you go within and you look at it and you do
right,
your work to
right.
discover what parts of myself are not integrated, where have I been exiling myself, what have I been suppressing, and we can't feel whole, empowered, thriving. We can't feel vitality as long as we have parts of ourselves that are missing. It's like, I view ourselves kind of like this puzzle, and we have these little puzzle pieces that are missing, and you can't really see the whole picture. You can't be in, you can't self-actualize with those things missing. And this is really the gift in some diseases, whereas I think most people view them as, a hindrance, go into this victimhood around it. And there's actually this potential to take your power back, is what I'm hearing from your story. And what I have a guess you help clients with now is to find these parts of themselves on a mind, body, and spirit level,
Yeah.
to give the true medicine that they actually need to be whole. Like, it's such a shame that when you were first sharing your story, you weren't actually given the true medicine that you needed. An antidepressant wasn't going to cut it for you. The true medicine that you really needed was to see yourself on that deepest level, to have that unconditional love and compassion for yourself, and not need to continue to get that from everyone else. Am I Am I catching your vibe correctly?
You definitely are, and it's so interesting because you know, when so often even in my field, right, we hear this idea of, oh, stop living in victim, right? And it's kind of like this judgment place. And I say this, like, we're all a victim of something, and that's real. Like, that's real. There's places where we've really been hurt. That's real. And it's important to recognize that we have been a victim, because in that place of victimization, this is what happens. What about me? Right? Like, that's the place of victim. Whenever we hear somebody talk about that, what they're really saying is, what about me? Great question. What about you? Great question. Like, that's the invitation to go deeper, to be able to say, okay, what's working for you? What's not working for you? What's continuing to, we either renew ourselves or we deplete ourselves, right? It's either love or fear. And sometimes it's hard to say, you know, um, to describe to people the difference between, it's that simple, love or fear. But maybe it's easier to think, is this a renewing behavior, a depleting behavior, right? And like, you can continue to live in that place of victimization if you want to, where you're totally powerless. You can. That's okay. That's your right. Okay. But what I'm asking you is that really serving you? Is that really allowing you to become the person that you want to be? And if it is, and that's where you want to stay, that's okay. That's none of my business. I wish you the best. But like, if you really want to figure out how to live a life that's worth living, we have to move from the place of victim, like, I'm helpless, somebody do something for me, to what can I do for myself? Even if it's one small single change, you know? One small single change. Because most of the time, we're not living in a place of helplessness that we need emergency intervention. And then there are times we are so victimized, we need emergency medicine. And that's beautiful. We want that to be there. And guess what? We want somebody to show up for you in an emergency medicine situation. But if it's not emergency medicine, like, what is the place that you're sitting in the victimization, where you can say, okay, what about me? Okay, what about you? What do you want? And how do we move you from that place? How do you empower yourself? What are the practices that you can do to start to recognize that you really are the one that you've been waiting for? You really are capable of moving on beyond some of these very self-limiting beliefs. They're just beliefs. And in the word belief is the word lie. So guess what, sister? You could tell yourself whatever fucking lie you want to tell yourself. But is it renewing or is it depleting? Is it moving you towards a life that's worth living, or is it moving you towards staying stuck in that level of victimization where you're powerless?
I love that self-inquiry question. What about me that can come from victimhood?
Yeah,
And yeah, like, consider being in victimhood, like, actually doesn't get your needs met. Like, I'm gonna say that. It doesn't actually get your needs met. But I really see that question, what about me, acts as a bridge from victimhood to self-sovereignty or
yes,
agency, being the creator of your life, because it actually inspires that self-inquiry of, what do I need to
right.
be who I am given what I've experienced in my life? And that's going to allow you to really get your needs met, to receive the true medicine that your soul is calling out for, given the life path you've been on so far. And yeah, that's going to lead to something that's more life enhancing, getting those needs met, filling in those puzzle pieces, becoming more whole.
And we don't know even all the time where all that information is going to come from, like where those resources are going to come from. But just being able to say, like, I want something more for myself. And sometimes I need help, right? And then just being open to what else is out there. Like, what am I doing to serve myself? So I'll give you an example of that. When I was divorced, it's probably now 17, 18 years ago, somewhere in there. But and I'm now remarried to an amazing human being. But during that time when I felt like my life was completely over. And I really did. Like I had quit a job 6 months before that I had been at for like 20 some odd years. So that was like my another family and a role that I knew. My daughter was graduating high school, going off to college for, my son was involved in his own stuff. And and at that moment, I was living in my mother's basement. And I was like, all the roles of who I knew that I was, like, and married to this man who owned a business and everybody knew him. And like all the roles of who I thought I was, I felt like I didn't have anymore. I didn't have the structure to like keep me grounded. But I knew I could not stay in this marriage one more second. And like having to make the decision that I did to leave that was like the hardest decision I probably ever made in my life. And I'm laying in my mother's basement just saying like, oh my God, I know I did the right thing, but this is very scary. I don't know what to do. I don't have a place to go. I don't have a job. Like I cannot not be a mom. Like all these questions that were coming up. And I felt so incredibly alone. And I started to cry and I felt myself reach out to source. And I said, I'm listening. I'm here. I'm doing what it is I know I need to do. I just need a little bit of help. I just don't even know where to start. And in that moment, I heard a barred owl out the window. And the owl was just doing its normal hoo hoo thing, like what owls do. But that's not what I heard. I heard the owl say, "Who are you?"
Mm.
And throughout the course of my shamanic training, I came to know that and came to believe, and through my sun moon dances, like I'm source. I'm light. I'm a light body. And that's what I said. I said, I'm source. I'm a light body. That's who I am. And like something like reaffirmed in me, like, yes. And I felt that land in my body again. And then the owl went off again. And what I heard this time is, you need to start at the nucleus. And I'm like, what the fuck is the nucleus? Like, what do you mean the nucleus? And then in that second, when I said, I don't even know what is the nucleus, boom, source came to me again and said, well, you need to have your prime, like your basic needs met, woman. And I'm like, my basic needs met. Oh, wait, I need money. I need a job and I need a place to live where my kids can be. So I was so grateful. The next morning I got up when I needed cash. That was the other thing. So next morning I woke up, I called a real estate agent. I called my old job. They offered me a new job with more responsibility and more money. Okay. And 3 days a week instead of 5 days a week. Okay. I called my credit card company. I got a cash advance. And that afternoon, I was shown the house that I'm now living in that was a rental for sale at the time. And it was a house that I'd always imagined I wanted to live in. It was like this idea with my first husband, like, no, you couldn't live out in the country. You're asking too much. No, you can't be whatever. And it was the house that I had begged him to go look at with me like 5 years before. It was that house, Erika. Like it was unbelievable. And and all of those things lined up within a day. Like how does that happen? You know what I mean? And so that just continued to solidify that I am the one. Everything is available to us. All the resources are there. We just have to be open to them. We just have to say, yes, I'm of value and I can receive that. Not I deserve that, because that like closes shit off, I feel like. But when we can open to, yes, I am, and I would love the help, like shit shows up. It's really fantastic and beautiful, like beyond words can even describe, you know?
Yeah.
And then I think there's sometimes that we forget about that and we kind of get a little bit numb to that as life moves on. And we have to remind ourselves that it's okay. Like, we don't need a 2x4 to call us back into alignment with that. We can remember that multiple times a day and feel the resonance of that vibration and let that openness and that, yes, this is who I am, and yes, the world is out there to like really support me, and it shows up.
I really see that as an example of you going from this victimhood consciousness to this creator consciousness. First, you were feeling really down in your emotions, and there's nothing wrong with that. We have to feel that.
Yes.
We get to be a victim sometimes, like you were
Yes.
saying, but then something shifted where you're like, okay, I'm ready to be in creator mode. I'm ready to be open to the signs. Like, I want to move forward. And then life got on your side and was like, okay, let's show up. Let's see how you can create and
Right.
generate more.
Right.
And yeah, like I just invite our listeners to become a little bit more self-aware. When are you in that victim consciousness? When are you in that creator consciousness? And neither one is right or wrong, good or bad,
Right.
better than the other.
They
And
both serve.
yeah, and you're not either or. Like
Right.
me, in any given day, I'm oscillating between victimhood consciousness and creator consciousness all the time. We all do it. It's again that self-awareness of what do I actually need to support me to come from this creator consciousness if you're looking to move forward in life, to generate something new, to walk down your path forward. And yeah, I really hear that. Like a lot of your work is about discovering what different people need to feel supported in their well-being so that
Right.
they can show up in their life as their creator.
Yes, and these experiences, which even tend to trigger us back into the victim aspect, I really think are more like, at the at a lower vibration, I guess I hope that's okay to use that language. Like it really feels like victim helplessness. But as you continue to grow and accept that this is the circumstances and you continue to choose life, because the other thing I recognized was that in that victimhood was the choice to live or die.
Mm.
Right. And I think that we all come to this planet, my belief, it doesn't have to be anybody else's belief, but I think we always come to the planet with a little bit of ambivalence of do I really want to be there and do all that hard work again? Could I just stay in source? And so I think that that sort of duality and that maybe just is on planet Earth. I don't know. I'll let you know when I get to the next place, right? But I think that duality is there to help kind of hone us
Yeah.
and hone us to like understanding that we are source. Every single religious text talks about you are the image of God. you know you're the image of God, like you are God, not to have power over somebody else but to have power over you. Like it's your sovereignty, it's your right, right.
I totally agree with you. I believe that it's actually intentional that we have these moments of forgetting and then
Yes.
remembering,
Yes.
this concealing and revealing. We're actually meant to feel powerless sometimes so that we can remember our power.
Yes.
And, we've all heard all the stories, you've shared yours today. It's like these moments of like rock bottom or true challenge in life, if we choose to, release the victimhood around that, it does have the power to forge us and help us see our true strengths and our true capability in our lives. And to me, like, that's really what it's all about.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I think too. And it's really just teaching people some skills, right, of how to do that and working with their own limiting beliefs that get in the way of that. And what I love so much about some of the techniques and tools is it's an internal discovery, not just an external, giving people direction, which sometimes can feel, like I'm in charge and there's a hierarchy there. And what I really encourage with everybody that comes in, or even the people in my own community that we sit in conscious community with, we're all like equal. We're all just trying to human. We're all just trying to walk each other home. We're all just trying to figure this shit out, right? But let's do it in a way that we're not continuing that triangle of victimization, where we're not judging somebody else, we're not victimizing, we're not rescuing, because we're really holding each other accountable to what our own experience is. There's a level of acceptance that this is this is life and this is humanity and this is where we're at. But where do we want to go? What do we want to create together?
I love that. And I would love for you to share more about quantum medicine for people who have never heard of that, don't know what it is. Can you enlighten us?
Yeah, so sure, I'll try to do the best I can. So I believe that we're all just energy. We're an energy body, and we can talk about that as like, the cells of our skin have one level of density, and it's the way the electrons and everything kind of syncs together. And, you know, we're made up of densities. Does that make sense when if I say it like that? So, you know, if we think about the density of our kidney is different than the density of our heart, right? Because the heart is muscle and it's all this and that, and the kidney's kind of, oh, it's kind of spongy and whatever. There's a different density that's there, and the mind itself, it has its own level of density. When we have limiting beliefs and limiting thoughts, they get restricted and kind of crystallize in our nervous system. And that becomes a density. It becomes a density even in the fascia of our body, okay, where all those nerve endings meet our muscles. And the fascia is kind of like, I look at the fascia almost like the fungi the fungi of our environment. In the forest, the fungi communicates everything to everything else in the forest, and that's kind of like our fascia does that in our nervous system. And it's the place between where our blood vessels communicate and our nervous system, our vagus nerve communicates, and to the muscles and so on and so forth. But like when we have the mind aspect of things, when we have a belief about anything, what happens in the body is a 1400 chemical response happens in our body. So if we have a belief that we are unlovable, that sits running in the 1.0 version of ourselves, which is conception to age, 8, 10, whatever, like that tape that's running in the background creates a 1400 chemical response in your body. Okay. So when we talk about hacking biohacks and things like that, one of the best biohacks is take a look at your damn beliefs. Okay. Yes, there's sunlight. Yes, there's taping your mouth shut. Yes, there's all these other things, getting more vitamin D, all these amazing things. Yes, all that's true. But like when you learn to master what's called coherence, when you're able to really master that it's really about love and creating that 1400 chemical response that's in relationship to love, again, renewing versus depleting, love versus fear. Now we really are becoming the mystics of our own being. So that's a little bit about quantum stuff there. Everything is energy. Your thoughts are broadcasted out. That's energy. Our heart field has an electromagnetic field when you're in a state of coherence that moves out in this amazing, I don't remember what the exact number is, but let's call it 20 feet around you. That's amazing, the impact that you have. And you all know this because when you walk into a room and somebody's just had an argument or a fight, they might be pretending everything is good, but you feel in your body that something is not right. That's the field that you're picking up. You just haven't been taught that's what that is. But we now know that we can measure not only the Heart Math is an amazing organization. We now know that we can measure the coherence of a community. We can measure the coherence of a group. You can measure your own heart coherence by hooking yourself up to a little device on your iPhone, super cheap. We can measure the electromagnetic field of the planet when people are all praying for peace. 30 years ago, that was woo-woo bullshit. Now we can measure that. It's real. It's real, people. Look at the power that you have. And so that's one part of it. And then the other part becomes like weaving together a personal plan for each individual, right? But then when homeopathy comes in, and a lot of people have heard about using homeopathy for acute care stuff. You have the flu. Here's a couple of flu remedies you use. It can be magic. It like helps so much. It's like magic. But when we have a chronic state, the energy, the quantum energy is so much tighter. And homeopathy basically is like sort of tapping on that energy body with a homeopathic remedy that matches what your resonance is. So let me give you an example because it's so much easier to give examples. Homeopathy is based on the principles of like cures like. So if you had an acute situation where you rolled yourself in some poison ivy and you're covered in a red hot itching burning rash, we would give you a remedy of poison ivy, and it's vibrational. There's no poison ivy actually in it. It's been diluted so much that if you looked at it under a microscope, all you're going to see is a sucrose tablet. You're not going to see poison ivy. Okay? And when you take that remedy for poison ivy, it's going to be so amazing. You're going to feel like great. The rash is going to be disappearing. It's amazing. But if you have a chronic constitutional state of poison ivy, which might mean you might have a constant herpes virus, or you might be prone to shingles, red hot itching burning. You might have somebody that overworks yourself. There's a whole mind component that goes with poison ivy. And so we would be matching like whatever your fears are, whatever you like to eat, whatever you avoid, your coping strategy, your way of looking at the world, your like unique blueprint that you're presenting in front of me, looking at all of your physical health, all of your mental health, all of the symptoms of every part of you, what's working, what's not working. We look at both of those things and we try to find a remedy that represents both those sides. And that's what we would give you. And I have seen the most beautiful, amazing things happen using this modality and integrating that in with the therapy work. Attachment styles shift just like in a matter of 6-8 weeks, when people can work with attachment styles for the rest of their lives and not get a whole lot of progress with that. You know, I've watched somebody who had significant dyslexia. It was part of her presentation that when she came in, and she no longer has dyslexia. And the dyslexia was actually a coping strategy, because what came out afterwards was that she had a very significant sexual abuse history that she wasn't aware of, that happened to start at preschool age during a preschool experience. So her brain associated school learning with abuse. And not everybody who has dyslexia, I'm sure, is going to have that experience. But for this individual person, that's what it was like. And so, you know, and she was in treatment with me for about a year. And I see her periodically at this point. I don't see her on a regular basis because she's well. You know what I mean? And so that's the nature of some of the stuff that the homeopathy can, with good therapy and counseling and sometimes nutritional support and some of those other things, really working on helping somebody build their vitality and become this, to understand that they really are the one, like they have it all within them. You just have to remove the barriers to healing.
Mm. What do you see as the new world that we get to create when more people heal themselves in these ways with this
Well,
whole
I think
platform?
that like if we can do this, right? Like look at the structures that start to shift and change. I can tell you that homeopathy costs me, when I give somebody a remedy, like less than $15, most of the time less than $10, okay? To treat somebody with a constitutional remedy. You know, look at how pharmaceutical companies, I mean, look at how all that stuff shifts. Look at how the paradigms shift, where we start taking more, we're taking more responsibility for our own wellness. Then we start to take more responsibility for the planet's wellness, for each other's wellness. Like, I feel like it's a huge paradigm shift at all levels of, and I come back to this. This is kind of like my soapbox of how we can step from love to, from fear to love, and how every single one of us is impacted by the victim triangle, every single one of us. And it's when we break free of that triangle that we now have the choice. And the collective consciousness is still in the triangle. And so as we shift our vibration out of that triangle as individuals, we now have the capacity to hold more love, to see more clearly all the pictures of where the triangle still stands, and how to like move through that and how to support each other moving through that.
Yeah, and I'd just love to connect some dots for our listeners who may not be familiar with this victimhood triangle. It's victim, perpetrator, rescuer, and you can just do a Google search on that. There's some resources that will go more in depth. This is actually something I just recently learned myself in like the past 3 months or something, and it's so enlightening where I can notice it show up like literally everywhere. And again, like I said, with the victimhood consciousness and creator consciousness, like we're all operating in like one of those spaces of the triangle at any given moment. Typically, like you said, there's ways that we can break out of it and choose a different type of consciousness, but it's not to throw shade on anyone embodying anything.
Right.
It's all just for your self-awareness. And with that self-awareness comes choice. With choice comes freedom, the freedom to create the world that we want to live in, one
Right.
that actually supports each one of our vitality and thriving.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's, and what I also would like the listeners to know, like there's no judgment in the victim triangle aspect of things, because this is the state that we're all living in, because that victim consciousness comes from generational trauma. It comes from this collective idea that 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 we're living in a state of fear. And so like the easiest place to see it is when I'm trying to teach somebody about this is go watch a Lifetime movie and identify where everybody's falling into the triangle, right? Watch the news and identify where everybody's falling into the triangle. Listen to any politician and see what's falling into the triangle. Who's pointing the fingers there? Who's the victim? Who's going to run and rescue somebody? Who's the perpetrator? Like watch it when you get into your families and just watch it happen, and like get some good awareness of it, and then we can choose, well, how am I going to engage in that, or how am I not going to engage in that? Because when we can start identifying what's happening out there, then we can also start identifying how that relates inside. So it's kind of like this little dance: awareness inside, awareness outside, awareness outside, awareness inside, because I truly believe that whatever our core stuff is, that's what we're going to see in the external environment. And as soon as we can identify that level of power that we have, wow, we can shift a whole bunch of things, right? Like the shamans really believe that this world that we see is just Maya. It's just illusion, right? And that's a really interesting idea, but when you're living in this, it's like, what the fuck does that mean? I have no idea what that means. But when you start really doing the internal process of looking at things, you're like, oh, yeah, I just created that. And the more that you do that, the more you understand that your thoughts really are creating the reality, because you're contributing to this. How are you contributing to this victim triangle consciousness? How are we contributing? And then how do we choose not to contribute? So
100%. And one more thing I want to put in for any listeners, because you mentioned, some of this comes from generational trauma. And some people, I've even had these thoughts myself, where it's like, well, my childhood was great. Like, I don't have deep trauma like some other people. So some of our listeners may be finding themselves in that space, but consider like just being a human, like there is trauma that you take in, like just being a woman, there are shoulds and boxes you get put in, which
yeah,
create your beliefs, which in a way, like can be trauma. Same with men,
yeah,
whatever gender you embody, there's boxes that our society has put us in that create how we think we can show up and operate in our lives. And that's really one of the biggest points of this podcast, Fuck the Box, Free Yourself, is to become aware of these boxes that we're in that limit us. And the victimhood, perpetrator, I forget the other one.
rescuer.
Yes, rescuer. That's a box in and of itself. So I hope all of our listeners just became that much more self-aware of parts of yourself that you may be blind to, and to sit with that and have that choice and then that freedom. And for you, Lori, any words left unsaid that you'd like to finish off with?
No, I could talk about this stuff forever, but I honor you, Erica, and what your mission is of helping people look to what the self-restricting boxes are in and what the boxes that society, kind of shapes around us. And I just invite people to find a community where they feel supported and do the internal external work, come into it because it really um, it really is it really is much more fulfilling. My relationships have so much greater intimacy and connection, and I think that's what we all want is deeper intimacy and deeper connection with each other and more authority over ourselves. I don't know any human on the planet that doesn't want to have more authority over their lives and their selfhood and their expression. And we need to really find communities that really help support us in that and empower us as we do that internal work, to really understand and become who we're meant to be.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much, Lori, for taking the stage and sharing all of your brilliance. I'll definitely put your information in the show notes for anyone who would like to reach out and play in your world.
Love that.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much, Erica.